So for this form sculpting, I wanted to show you a few more, slightly more advanced techniques and such. And what that really means is just some slightly more involved things. So let's pop over to Fusion and we'll get into some examples. So prior example is I made a somewhat questionable frog. But this is somewhat questionable simply just because it has some funky back legs. But more of that I wanted to show you. Well, one, I put a texture, or not a texture map, but a appearance of that's what cloth looks like on there. So I'll switch over to color mode. So shift in, and hey, it's even green. I wanted to show you a few things about like how I went about making this, both toggling symmetry on and off, breaking up faces to make like the toes and such like that. So that way it's subdividing faces, but also wanted to show you some of the features of how I made less direct things. And these are more of shapes, either projected and offset into the back here, or these are more of just other freeform shapes joined using the combine tool, whichever. So there's a variety of different ways you can go about this. So I did want to do a couple of examples. I wanted to kind of show you how I quickly how I kind of made out this frog, and then also show you how I wanted to try to make some semblance of this adorable, mildly unsettling octoduck gay hair. But let's show you real quick something about like this frog. So how would you go about making something more complex? Because so far we just did like the little duck form, which is pretty straightforward. It's a kind of rounded shape with another kind of rounded shape bridged together. This I made for the most part, reshaping a single form object. So let's start something new. And with here, go ahead and save first. Frog 2. All right. So with this, I'm going to just kind of freeform it. Now that can be a good idea, or it's a way you can really quickly get lost. I recommend, even if you don't have a canvas image already brought into your project, I would highly recommend at least having reference images handy. Because even if you're making something that is more of a toy, simplified, stylized reference to a real object, a real animal, something like that, it is always best to have reference images on hand that you can refer back to, and often, because even if you are stylizing something, abstracting something, referencing back to the original object, you will at least know things like, okay, if I'm trying to make this look duck-like, well, I need to make sure that this bill has maybe like upswept and like an upswept tip here. Or if I'm trying to make it more of an octopus, obviously it has like some spots and some tentacles and some basic, I don't know why I just orbited down like it's a real object. Trying to look at the bottom. Or if it has like some little sucker, stuff like that. Just those kind of little reference details that will help you make your object a little more, I don't want to necessarily say accurate, but with some of those more of caricature-esque features that are much more directly referential. So with the frog, yeah, it wouldn't be a bad idea to bring in a canvas. But for now, I want to show you what will happen. I basically want to show you what might happen with a freeform. So let's enter the form space. And with this, I'm going to start with a box because it's much more rounded shape. And because I want to make something that's a very roughly rectangular-ish, but I'll show you what I mean by that, by why it's kind of rectangular. So let's start at the bottom, smack in the middle, and I'm going to create this as a center box. That's what the selection has. So it's a center-based rectangle. Sorry. All right. Let's say 120 by, sure, half, 60. Okay. Why did it jump? Okay. And why is it doing that? There we go. Dang it. It's trying to. Problem is, if you hit enter, it snaps ahead. I really wish Fusion didn't have it this way. Let's start this again. Because if you start there, 120 by 60, and instead just click, now it gives you the rest of the options. I really wish it didn't start with that simplified box version. So just be aware that continue to be aware that that's a thing. Now for right now, I do not want to start adding too much faces, mainly because if I start to add more and more, the way that you enter adding faces, lengthwise, any of that stuff, you can see how much more it adds. And not only that, is it adds it all the way around the shape. I find if I'm going to do something like this, and what I mean by is like a frog, obviously it's going to have 2 arms, 2 legs, or 4 appendages, and some eyeballs on top. I don't need what will become the cells to create the arms and legs to also be on the top and bottom and all that. It makes a lot more sense for me to have this really simplified kind of green eraser shape come in and then add parts to it. I clicked over and it automatically finished. Whatever, that's fine. I'm going to start with this anyway. I didn't stretch it, anything like that. That works. So what you want to do first is, in this, start to orient your piece. So before I actually move this, because I want to kind of imitate this somewhat propped up shape, and I'm going to kind of go for something like, a little spring peeper kind of leopard frog, and keeping in mind that what do they have? The big kind of protruding eyeballs, and a little bit like along the back, little protruding butt, something like that, as opposed to like the tree frogs, which have big old bug eyes and the big suction cup finger, stuff like that. So, and that's what I mean by it's a good idea to keep those kind of features on hand. Anyway, we've got a green eraser. So switch to right view, and what I want to do with this is move this object, and all I'm doing is, just to start, I'm just going to put it at a little bit of a tilt. That's all. Starting something like that, super duper. Okay. Because what I'm doing is now, once I start to enter the edit form mode, I'm going to select by, let's see, we'll keep it by vertices, and I'm going to keep soft modification on for now. Right there, let's check the actual effectiveness range. Not too bad, good. And I'm going to just start to bring this out, but I'm realizing that with the soft modification on, I'm trying to drag this center point out into just that, a little bit of a point. So let's deactivate that. Now it pulls more at a point, and that can start to create my little kind of Kermit-y looking thing. Heck, there you go. Go make it Kermit the Frog instead of a, whatever. All right. So just starting to give some shapes to this. Now, what I meant by wanting to divide this up a little more effectively is I could, instead of when I created this shape, have more faces automatically put in, excuse me, I can instead put them in here. So use the insert edge, divide up the face. There you go. Now, one thing though, symmetry was not active. I should have put that in right at the get-go. So if you forget to, it's all right. Just back up before you did anything too drastic. Go to symmetry, select the faces you want to have across from one another, and between the two is where the symmetry will appear. Select across there, brighter green line on the green form there, you're all set. Great. You can see more clearly if I switch modes. Bright green line, symmetry is bilateral. Good, that's what I would like. Okay, now I can go back in, add my insert edge there. There you go. Now it's on both sides. Excellent. Okay, and even that shape, you can even start to just kind of imagine how this is going to go. Those vertices can very quickly become my eye points. These faces back here, I can start to drag out for arms. So with that, let's re-enter edit mode. That point, drag that up, but kind of does some stuff, starts to kind of get a point there. Good. I don't need to divide this up too much just yet, but we're going to kind of start to get some of that shape. Nice. All right. I'm going to select my face, and I'm going to select back here, and I'm going to use the extrude method. So press and hold Alt, drag that out. Whoop. Kind of sort of starts to make little winglets. And again, just play with this stuff. But as you're working, something like this, I want to orbit, or I want to translate this down, but you'll start to end up with like kind of wingtips. So it's important to remember to continually move your object around. if you're working in multiple directions. It's a lot easier if you can just work in one dimension, like looking straight on. I could move forms straight up and down, but I lose rotation and things. So like with this, what I mean by that is, all right, so I have this little stub, this little stump of an arm thing. I want to rotate that downward a bit so that the next time I extrude down, it's not being held back by its orientation. So trying to match up my orbit, though, that gets funky. Press and hold Alt again, extrude out. You see what just happened? I accidentally grabbed the rotation. Definitely not what I wanted. So this is definitely where sometimes it gets real tricky, is just trying to work in 2 dimensions, meaning, again, you only ever have your kind of X and Y to work with, regardless of what plane you're working on. So press and hold Alt, dragging out. There we are. It starts to get kind of funky, but now I kind of got like some flipper action going here. But I can start to drag that forward, rotate that around so that's pointed more that way. And remember, you can always go back and rework these. So things like if I wanted this edge here, go by edges, double click here. Now I can, since this kind of looks a little funky like that, I'd like to drag that backward, kind of sort of creating a bit of an elbow, something to that effect. And I can orbit around that sort. We're starting to get some shape. All right, go back by face. Over here, pan around, kind of dragging that arm in, or what will become that arm. And you can see how it all kinds of really starts to twist around. And this is one of the downfalls, or not downfalls, it's just one of the limitations of working this way. It kind of starts to twist around in some weird ways, and you get some odd distortions. So just be cautious as you work this, because essentially it would make a lot more sense if I could orbit in different directions or against different planes, but that's just not the way that this sort of interface with a mouse and keyboard function. So you have to really be kind of cautious with this stuff. But at the same time, just play. Don't feel like you have to keep this all very restrictive. All right, so that's not a terrible frog kind of shape. Looks more like it's ready to hug than hop, but that's okay. Remember, it's a toy animal. That works. If I wanted to sharpen this corner here for the elbow, hit OK. And I can go to modify, and that's where I would use something like crease. I can crease this edge here. Makes for a pretty aggressive elbow there. If you select all of them, you can see what happens. It makes an immediate hard line. And that's not quite what we want. So maybe you'll try creasing part of them, like in the front there. Oof, that did some weird stuff. Maybe just the back. So let's deselect that one. Back kind of makes more of a sharper angle. And I'm going to try to fix the rest. So let's just see what that looks like. If not horrible. That's not great, but not bad. Okay. So now I can go back in, edit form, and let's drag these edges. I'm going to select all of it, but then I'm going to deselect the one that I just creased. And with something like that, now I can try to drag this backward. That's not letting me move just those. It's selecting all of them. Let's try that. And I'll try to orbit this, or not orbit this, but drag this backward. Yeah, it's dragging everything. All right, well, poop. That wasn't working. So what I can do instead, because basically what I'm trying to do is collapse those, shrink it, scale it down. Let's try that. Use the scale selection. There we go. That gets much more of what I was trying to do. And what I was trying to do is have that little bit of a sharper bend there, but not so sharp that everywhere else ends up as, like you saw, like a really sharp bend. And that's just not what I want. And I want to get rid of this little pocket here. That's not quite what I want. So I will select by that vertex alone and drag that outward and just kind of soften it a little bit. And doing some kind of funky stuff. Okay, nice. So that starts to work. Now what I want to do is I want to work with the front here, which will become the hand or the front leg, front foot, whatever. So with that, kind of want to get an idea of just how you're going to go about this. And think in terms of, with this one, what I did is I chose some of the faces and then split them off. With this one, let's see, it's just a nub. So I'm going to have to actually add multiple faces onto here. So you have a couple of options. One, you might want to go ahead and tweak a little bit more with the edit form, and I'm just rotating that or that face so it kind of sits square-ish. That's all. All right. Now, maybe for a last bit, I'll do an extrude, press and hold Alt, drag outward. That kind of got weird, big, but you see what it kind of already did is it kind of made a little bit more of a kind of sort of flat-ish section. That's not bad. So I'm going to try and see what scaling it down does. No, that's a full scale. So let's try just kind of doing this so it kind of flattens it. Yeah, that's not bad. That's not bad at all. Okay, good. That gives me something more I can work with. Now, we got a couple of options for dividing up this face. We could do insert edge, of course. Now, you're kind of limited in this. So if I did it to there, yeah, I could see how I could start to break that up. That would make sense right there. I kind of start to add some, but I really need more. So let's try, instead of that one, let's experiment with subdivide, which we haven't really messed with yet. Subdivide breaks up the faces entirely. So I select that, and you can see how it really starts to add a lot more features. But you can also get in a lot of trouble as far as how many faces it creates. But with something like this, remember, we're not trying to create, like here, you're not trying to create just one, you're trying to create multiple. So you actually kind of want more. And remember, you can always back up a little bit. So this is why it's important to experiment with this kind of stuff while you have time. Meaning that, remember, there's not a history slider in Form Workspace. So finish your thought, and then you can save, come back to it later. But if you don't, you can't Control Z or Command Z and back up from there. So this kind of weird subdivided nub, let's see what we got with this. If we don't like it, that's where we can switch back out. So let's try some edit form again. And from now, I want to select by face. And let's just try this. Try doing it by hand. One, drag out. Slightly horrifying little toe-like thing. Another one. We're going to make some not okay fingers for this thing. I think this is going to quickly turn into more of a Muppet than anything. And that's not a bad thing. Oof, that is a rough looking little hand. Oop, what do we get there? All right, that did some weird stuff. So as I extruded outward, you can see what happened. Two of them worked really well. The other ones, not so much. And you can see what I mean by that is that that face is so thin that is absolutely going to create errors. So let's try first rotating around just to see if we can get some more dimension out of it. Not like that. Rotating down and around, sort of, kind of, not really. So maybe instead we do try scaling it up. There you go. That's working to some degree, but not really. Try scaling in a different direction. Not really working. So these are the kind of areas where you're going to have to maybe just admit, all right, that's not going to work at all. So you can either Control Z out of that, back up, back up, back up, back up. That's going to kind of work. Or if you say you had saved and you need to come back to it, that sort, you can always just delete the whole thing. So back to where I was. I don't like any of this. Remember that if you are at this point, I don't like any of this. All right. I can select the whole thing, delete all of it, and you just end up with a little sliver there. Now that right there kind of shows you exactly what the problem is, in that that is an opening, but that's not a lot. So it might not be a bad idea to like close that up or delete the whole area. I don't know. This is where the whole experimenting thing comes in. But something like this, we can patch that hole very quickly with going back to modify, fill hole, select the edge. There you go. Brings it right back. No problem. Don't forget that you can use all your different selection points, fill star, collapse. That adds way too many features. So actually, either the reduce star, that actually works pretty nicely, or the fill star. In this case, I'm going to go with the reduce star. And remember, you can select keep edges. Definitely don't want that. This solution, actually deleting those, actually gave me a pretty nice different face to work with. Okay. So we got our little kind of frog-ish hands thing going here, kind of, sort of. And we can go ahead and try to create something else. But if this is all getting kind of wonky on you, well, remember, edit form. Again, you're going to go back and forth with edit form and such here. Let's try scaling it this, nope, squishing it down a little bit. There we go. A little bit less terrifying. Go back to this. Now this time I'm going to extrude straight out and see it's still collapsing it very strangely like that. I'm not sure why it's doing that, even though it was kind of more of a straight face there. So let me show you something else that happens. Let's Control Z that. And we've been using the extrude face by press and hold Alt and come out. But there's also an extrude surface. And the difference in that is, remember when we delete a face, basically this turns from a solid to a surface, because now I can see inside. Well, if I go back to edit form and use the edges and select that whole face there, or that whole kind of weird face thing going, or edge going there, I can extrude that, but press Alt and Shift, and it'll create a much sharper edge. Now, in this case, I don't really actually want a sharper edge. Or is it Alt Control? There we go. Sorry, not Alt Shift. I apologize. It was Alt Control. So let's Control Z that. So press and hold Alt and Control makes a sharp extrusion, but that only works on a surface. So I can't do, or that only works on edges with no surface inside. I cannot do that on just selecting a regular surface. It's only on that edge. Now, of course, this is still kind of a funky thing for whatever is happening with this, which is fairly problematic. Oof, that is doing some weird stuff. So I don't know what is going on with the geometry of this. So we might just have to deal with a three-fingered frog here. But just wanted to show you how you can play with that a little more. And that's going to come in handy here in a moment. So let's go back, fill this hole. I don't like that at all. That works. Whatever the heck's happening there, I'm not sure. Other stuff you can do, well, I don't like this edge at all. That's kind of doing this kind of funky thing. Play around with some other stuff. These toes kind of got a little weird. There is a tool called Cylindrify. This can do some really interesting stuff here. Of course, it can also make for really horrifying stuff. So let's just try to select all these things here. Oh my God. That I just, okay, that's not going to work in this case. Cylindrify works really well if it's a more complex shape, meaning that if it's kind of got a little knobbly and weird on you, especially with extrusion, stuff like this. But because I have this little bump out going here, it's really not doing so hot. So I do want to try one other thing here, which is deleting some edges. All right, that gave it more of a cuff. So unless you got like a fancy frog that you're going to end up with giving it a nice little fancy shirt, that's not going to work either. So ultimately, you got some weird you've got some weird stuff going here. What you might end up having to do is either cut all this off or find a way to start deleting faces. You can certainly do things like try smoothing areas. So if you select between some areas, you can try smoothing out. But if it's a complex shape, you can end up doing some real weird stuff that obviously ain't going to work. You can certainly push pull. We tried Cylindrify. That ain't really working on that spot. Oh, yeah, a lot of these aren't really going to work as well as I'd like. So what I might just have to do is, in this case, let's try just deleting some faces entirely, a larger amount, see where it goes. Made a weird hole. Okay, that's really not bad looking. That kind of actually gets real close to what I want to do. So what we can try is go back over to weld vertices. I have a fair amount of ones that actually match up pretty well. So let's see what we can do with this. This might turn into a really bad situation too, but let's try snapping some of these together. Now it went to simplify visual mode just to help things be a little more visually easy to deal with. Looks like over here is where it's going to be real problematic. Let's try some stuff. Might be bad, or might be bad, might be good. That is a really weird little spot. There's two vertices right next to one another. And this is one where you have to like zoom. Oh, geez. Lost where it was. It zoomed in too far. Let's select OK. See what happens here. All right, it is defaulted back to regular mode. Uh-oh. Looks like might have pushed it too far. Yep. Let's see. Yeah, there's all kinds of errors now. Yeah, let's try. Well, this is a perfect opportunity to try some of the other options of utilities, repair body. Yep, that's what I figured. Lots of errors right in here. This is why it wasn't going back, is because we have a bunch of little errors here. Let's try auto repair. Looks like it fixed a couple of them. Not enough. Let's select OK. Looks like what we might have to do is, because if you look real close over here, these all got really funky and overlapping. So now it might just end up being we have to just do some serious deleting of faces. Now that's starting to get better, but we're also going to end up with some areas that still are giving us problems. So looks like that corner is good. We got kind of a floating vertex here. Let's try to repair some. Yeah. Let's try the repair, or not repair mode, sorry. Go back and weld some vertices again. Where are you? I always get lost on that. That ain't gonna work. Well, it looks like we kind of got a little lot lost in here. So I think its feet are a complete lost cause, and that's okay. This is the kind of stuff that you end up needing to run into and just kind of find your way back out. If this isn't working well enough, then don't be afraid to just go ahead and delete stuff. I'm going to use a from the left selection box, so it only selects that hand. Delete, round it back out. So all the stuff that I just did, yeah, it's a shame that happened, but I kind of got a little lost on everything, and you might find that the only way to your way back out is to just delete stuff. So don't be afraid to do that. So now I can go back to edit form. I can close this off, or I can again go back, select this edge, and remember, if you want this to be a straight sharp angle, press and hold Alt and Control, and it extrudes directly outward. That's only if you're making it like, thin. Or go back and use our regular just Alt, and it rotates everything. So you're good there. So keep dragging it around. Rotate this into position. We're gonna have to get our little frog hand back. And that's unfortunately one of the things that can happen with this. I really kind of got a fair bit lost with what I was wanting to do there. And that's just one of the difficult things about working in the freeform space. It's a little bit almost too freeform for its own good. So what I'm doing here is I'm just rotating things, trying to just squish, play around, see what I can make work. There we go. I need to use the scale to open that back up. Okay, now I can Alt, extrude forward again. Okay, so now we're back to a little bit less terrible version of what I did before. Bring these back in. It's kind of got little noodle arms. I'd like to rotate that. So we got the beginnings of a flat foot again. Okay, that'll work. We're doing time. Okay. So now go back, fill hole, that front. Yep, pretty much right where we were. Good. Okay, that's fine. Not a bad thing. So now, since that kind of turned into a bit of a disaster, Subdivide, I honestly, for stuff like this, I wanted to show you how that works. I don't really like adding subdivide because it divides too much. I like to try to keep it a little more simple. So I'm going to use the insert edge mode. We'll do both, and I'll tighten this up a little bit so that they're a little bit closer to one another. What's that? We'll just say 0.25, so it's a quarter of the way between there. And I'm going to do the same over here. Right click, repeat insert edge, right there. And we'll go a little bit further out. So yeah, 0.5. Sure. Okay. Now that I have these back to a somewhat more reasonable, oddly nub shape, I can go back to my edit form, and we can start pulling these fingers back out again. So by face, holding Alt, extruding outward. Kind of got some funky looking feet here again, but that's okay. And this one will make kind of a weird little thumb action going. All right. So very funky looking, but some different things you can do with this. Select all of these faces, and I can kind of shrink this down a little bit, meaning that this all kind of got a little bit tall. Use the scale tool, smoosh his little toes a little bit. Definitely need to do some tweaking to that. This one over here, that got real weird. So I'm going to select just that last face, rotate it, so it gets a little bit, man, that's still pretty funky, isn't it? Yeah, that got weird. Oh, well. You're going to, oh, I forgot that my selection is by faces, so switch to by edge. That one too, come on. Why is it selecting all but that edge? There we go. And this is where you have to like, all right, well, rotate. That's doing some bad stuff. Don't like that at all. Let's try to scale it down. Scale can be a surprisingly effective tool in lieu of being able to rotate things in position. And the problem is, as you can see right here, look how the whole circle, that edge kind of flattened out. So actually I was trying to rotate possibly in the wrong direction, orbit it this way. That actually gives it much better dimension. I got like a smushed giant Acme thumb going, but that actually gets me a little bit closer to where I wanted to be. So from there, now I can do more of a uniform scale, shrink that down a little bit. That gets me much better to where I want to be. So these are the kind of things you might have to figure out just how to manipulate around. And it's more of about less knowing exactly where you're going and more of just being able to figure out how to find your way back. And that's really one of the most important things with this. So frog leg or frog hand got real funky there. I think this whole outside edge needs to be shrunk down a little bit. That kind of got a little, ooh, geez, little giant. Might have to tweak that, but all right, that is real weird looking. Not just because it doesn't have any back legs, but because the whole thing got a little funky. Maybe we select all of those again. Come on. Not far enough over. There we are. And from there, let's try scaling that way. There we go. Shrinks it down a little bit. Might need to try rotating the whole thing. So there you go. Just try playing around with rotating and scaling. That's really going to get you quite far with this. Let's say okay with this. That's getting pretty funky enough as is. We haven't even done the back legs, so stuff to that effect. Let's save there. Front legs ish. So one of the other areas before I get into the back legs, because this kind of all went off the rails. Some stuff to do would be like really trying to figure out, okay, well, where do I really want to put like the legs or sorry, the eyes, stuff like that. Easy things to do would certainly be if I wanted to shrink the head a little bit to kind of give a little bit more of a definition. I know frogs don't really have like a separate head, but you could do things like insert edge again and select all the way around, which may or may not work. Not going to work there because I've divided it up so much. Also, I just want single. Now that's selecting definitely on the wrong way because I actually want it over there. So something to that effect. If you find that you are not being able to select all the way around, keep a measurement option, meaning that if you have already set, say, I want to subdivide right here, but I also want to do it over here. So if I'm not being able to select all the way around, double check and make a note, like actually write it down, the numeric input. So let's say negative 0.5, just to keep it a little bit easier to deal with. There we go. That's starting to get funky, but that's okay. Do it again for over here. At least it also saves your last selection. But problem is that doesn't necessarily match up with what we had before. So let's try to get that more or less where it is, or more or less where the other one is. Unfortunately, there's not actually a snap for that. So, and here we are again. made it too funky again, so it defaulted out. So that might actually be too much. And what the reason it did that is because I was trying to get those vertices together, but because they are so close, but not close enough to where they're exact, but they're also not far enough apart, the surface modeling algorithm kind of got a little screwy. So let's just Control Z, move that back forward. There we are. Okay, fine. That's honestly one of the most effective ways to deal with stuff like this. So if you find yourself in that position, yeah, like I said, just Control Z back out of there. Now you can start really tweaking everything else. So like the top side here, all right, go back, working with vertice. Let's try to move this inward a little bit. That gets shrunk. Good. That's more or less where we want to be. A lot of this is going to be toggling back and forth between tools and going back into the edit form space, which unfortunately, it's not a very good workflow, but that's just how Fusion works. So this is the whole making it work within what you got going. So I'm just going to kind of try to knock out the back legs here and not turn it into a complete disaster again. Now for what I ran into when I was doing this one, as you can see, I kind of went off the whole corner. And what I realized I should have done was extend like I did the front and then go off. So edit form, select just that vertice or vertex rather, and I'm going to drag that directly backwards. And I think this whole body is a little bit too small or too long at this point. So now I'm going to drag the whole thing forward a little bit. That looks correcty-ish. Good. Okay. Now I can select my face. And I am not selecting that center line. So when I extrude this out, so again, Alt gives me frog butt. Good. And I actually kind of want these little divots here because those are going to be the where like a leopard frog and such has like the pelvis kind of sticks up. Good. So again, we're going to try to orient this not into getting into a disaster. Get up to there. Not bad. This would certainly be the point to where it's good to actually double check frog anatomy, because at this point, actually, these should be more forward and that should be rotated around the other way, which gives, I don't think most frogs have like a airfoil for a butt. So yeah, this would definitely be the point where you kind of check on some stuff. So again, if you're kind of making this as a toy, look into how these things actually go. I don't think I like that whatsoever. So instead, maybe I work from the side after all. All right. There we go. Oof. Still looking pretty rough, isn't it? Definitely double check your anatomy. I'm having a bit of a brain fart. There we go. Rotate there by face. Maybe it'll just be like a flying frog, which isn't, well, it is kind of a thing, but not really in this case. Ugh. All Not entirely sure how I'm getting this so terribly, terribly wrong. There we go. There. That's less awful. They got that kind of W back leg thing going. All right. So let's just double check kind of sort of where we are. Something, sort of kind of to that point. All right. Let's smush this down a bit. And now I can try dividing up these faces again. Now we're going to run into a lot of the same problem if you don't try to orient stuff as best you can, but kind of is what it is. Okay. Select OK. Using a insert edge, going to drag some edges over here. Let's say 0.25. Good. Do it again. And this one. There-ish. Let's say 0.5. Okay. So a little bit more controlled this time. So now when I go in to edit form and extrude these outward, it's a little bit less terrible. So the key here really ended up being just try to be a little more uniform with your actual shaping, and you'll have less trouble right off the get-go. So this is all very, very funky looking, obviously, but you see the problems that you can run into very quickly. And one of the biggest ones, I'm free-forming it, but at the same time, I'm not checking references, and that's where I keep getting lost because I keep forgetting where the thing needs to be oriented to. So keep an image handy. If you're trying to do something like this, maybe keep actual canvases on hand in the actual project. You can at least kind of see where things should be going and at least point you in the better direction. Let's try finish form here and see if we ran into any errors. Great, no errors. I realize I misspelled that and I don't care. The other thing I wanted to show you on this is how I made the details in the back. Now, with this, like this shape here, I used the same thing we did for the duck, which is projecting a sketch, split face, and bring that off. The other ones, I tried chopping up the face itself and extruding those out, things like that. And this ball here is exactly that. So you can certainly add features and such by just adding details, or something like this. You can, of course, move back in like the eyes. What if you wanted these much more actually like spherical? Well, you could actually plop in a couple of spheres. So let's put that roughly where we want it to be. Let's see, 10, 20. Giant. Well, it ended up being kind of more like a tree frog anyway. Now, because of where I'm putting this, smack in the middle, and it's going to make a divot in its head, double check your operation. It automatically wants to cut. So instead, go to new body, move it over into position, or right now you're just plopping it down, then move it into position. Say, okay, great. Now move it and just drag it into position, which kind of feels like cheating, but not really, because this is just one of the things, like it's not going to be able to control it as easily. So just use it this way. Plop it into place, say, okay, I like that kind of, sort of. Mirror it, select that object. Mirror plane is, of course, the actual plane. Bloop. And there you go. Now you at least have something more effective. And if you need to, now you can go back, edit that form. And what will happen is when you go back into edit form, and because everything's kind of going green, let me shift mode so you can see stuff more easily. I want to just edit this shape here. I want to kind of do some tweaking here. Let's go by vertice, and like here, I want to move it up and move some stuff forward. That effect, great. Not seeing it. There we are. It was overlapping. So just for the sake of the conversation, I'm pulling these by vertex down. You can see this ghost of an image of where it just was. That's Fusion's method of at least giving you some reference of what you're altering now that you've gone back in to edit a previously finished form. Now, the problem is you don't see that as clearly as if you're making it bigger than the original shape was. So that kind of messes with that problem, but you do at least have some ghost of a reference, so you can at least kind of try to see what's happening there. So something like this, again, you go in here and finding, you know what, I'd like to add an edge right about there-ish, so at least I can have a little bit more to work with. Maybe what I want to do is divide this up even more so I can make some areas sink in, anything to that effect. Ultimately, like I said, as you go along, you'll add complexity. Like if I decide, you know what, this whole thing here, I really would like a little bit more complexity so I can, oh, that's not letting me go over there at all. All right, cancel that. I'm going to try and make a little bit more features for the eyeball. So it might end up being what I need to do is actually subdivide one of these and build it out more. It's just kind of where we are with some of this stuff. So you can certainly add in other forms, other elements. So if I were to shift this over, there's still an appearance on, so you can at least see this stuff more clearly. By object, I don't know, we'll just go with paint for the moment. And just so you can see it, heck yeah, metal flake frog. There you go. And some sweet metal flake eyeballs. There we go. So you can most certainly just drop in other shapes. Kind of feels like cheating, but not really. You're not going to be able to get a very good, perfectly smooth, round form out of this. Now, had I gone in and continued to subdivide the shape up more, I would have a little bit more control. So that's what you need to do. What I want to show you next is a couple different ways to add additional features like onto these planes and such like this. So we're going to pause for a moment and try to add some detail that way. Okay, so we've got again, another questionable frog that might or might not have already been run over. But I wanted to show you a couple of different ways to add more detailed features to something like this. And what I mean is that, we've been playing with the form space and such like that. That's great. How can you add to a shape that's already made? Meaning I don't have to go back, edit the original shape. How can I add to it? Now, obviously, I use the sphere tool and just created a couple spheres, moved them in place and mirrored them to make the eyes for the moment. We can tweak those later and such, but I want to add like features to this because, like, a lot of frogs have like spots or stuff like that on the back. These are just some random ones I drew here. And I made some of this by projecting a sketch, offsetting that set sketch after I split the face. So I'm going to show you a couple of those. And first one is exactly that. So say I want to add like some stuff to the back or its belly. I don't know, whatever. So let's work with the back. So you got two options. For one, you can start with a construction plane. Now, the trick to a construction plane is you don't want just a straight plane. I want something that's actually going to fit to the back because I want to be able to project more or less directly at it. So at a kind of averaged angle to this back. Now, with that, you can, of course, make like plane at an angle and you try to work that way. The other thing you can try, if this is somewhat straight enough, you can try, create a sketch, and actually select the back here. It's not letting me, so there you go. That kind of have your answer right there. So you can try that. Sometimes it works if the back or whatever your form is kind of straight enough, but realistically, it's not going to be. So let's escape out of that. And I'm going to use just that. I'm going to create a plane at an angle. So like with anything, you have to start with an existing plane. So select line. You have to create one first. So it doesn't work directly off of a regular plane. Normally these do. Sometimes some of the options you start with one and it's like an offset plane, that sort. In this case, like I was saying, you're trying to kind of like make an average of this backside. So to do this, create a sketch on an existing plane, like in this profile right side. Great. You just need a single line. Let's start somewhere above. And like I said, kind of average it. That works. Okay. And that's all. Select sketch. So now I go to construct, drop down, plane at an angle, select that line. That's going the opposite direction. So rotate it 90 degrees. Good. There you go. You can see how you can create a plane that is kind of aping the whole thing. Select OK. When I go to the right side, there you go. All right. Now I can work off of this plane. So create a sketch. Let's go kind of at this quarter angle here. Go to select sketch, and it's going to snap to the correct angle. I don't know why it just went that way, but there we are. Now, if you want to make something that's going to be mirrored or so, might as well start with a line, switch to a construction line, draw straight up the backside. There we go. So that's going to end up being my mirror line. Now, anything I draw on one side, I can mirror across. So let's use like a fit point spline and just kind of make like a doodle on the back here. Something, something, something. Sure, that works. And as I orbit around, you can see that's kind of floating up in space above. Now, of course, that should not have been a construction line. There we are. Now, I want to work on that angle. And let's use offset line to give a little bit of thickness to that. Let's say, yeah, sure, 4. Okay. Ugh, everything is on there. I had it, everything was as a construction plane. All right, now we'll use a point-to-point circle to close up that line. Boop, boop. There we go. Do it again on the other side. Boop, boop. Great. And of course, we can trim this. There we go. Now, for a different reason, I'm going to add an additional offset line. Oops, I shouldn't have closed that up. I'll do it later. That's okay. We'll do one on the other side. All right, so we finished sketch. Now, you have that sketch. Great. And like we did with the duck wing, I can take this, go to modify, split face, select the faces it's going to interact with, and select my splitting tool, which is that profile, and it's going to project all the way through. Don't need that. So deselect the splitting tool. It's only going to select the backside or affect the backside. Select OK. Now that has been projected down there. Now you got a couple of options here. I've got this face split. We could do like we did before. I could go to offset face, select all those faces, drag this outward. I could deboss it, drag it inward, whatever you want. That works. Another thing you could do, let me cancel this. You could do something like use a pipe tool. Now you have this line here. Now sometimes it gets a little bit finicky and you're not able to keep selecting, which gets really irritating. I hate when it does this. Come on. Oh, probably should have saved. Nope. This part gets really irritating sometimes because it's a funky line. Whoops. Whoa, 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 whoa. What happened there? Because it's a line that traverses like multiple planes and such, it won't let you select too much at a time. So you might have to pre-select. Let's try that. Hit the pipe tool. There we go. So if I pre-select the line, now it'll let me select multiple stuff. So I could use like new body, and I don't know, we'll make that. We'll make it a little bit thicker. 3. So I don't know, you can have a weird like tube coming off. So that would be really good for actually just making a straight squiggle. So let's cancel that. On one side here, I will use the offset face. Select those. We'll go up 3 millimeters so you can see what's going on there. Super good. Now go back to my sketch. And on the other side, We'll just use, fit point spline. We'll just kind of make a little bit of a doodle here. Great. Finish sketch. Now, again, modify, split face, all of those. Ugh, it hid my sketch again. Splitting tool, do not extend. Said, oh, it was already not extended. There we are. Make sure it's all doing so. Super good. Okay. What's going on? Give me an error. I can't see it. Oh, compute failed. Oh, okay. Well, let's try it again. Split face. I want to split those faces. I want to split with that line. Now, what might be the problem this time? Doobly doobly doo. It does not extend beyond anything. Not sure. Long vector, that works. So let me explain something real quick, just in case you run into some errors. The split with surface sometimes will fail. I'm not sure why it might be doing it this time, but there we are. So you see it failed before. That was a default setting. Let's try along vector. What that means is basically it is just trying to split it's all about how it projects from the line that's floating in space on the construction line to the shape. In this case, along vector means it's along like an actual like projected path, a vector. It's along a projection line rather than just kind of extending that line. Sometimes the line extension does weird things as it wraps around complex forms. So let's try it with that this time. And projection selection, or project direction rather, it's already there, so that's fine. Yeah, I don't know why it would be doing anything. So deselect that, select OK. Calculatify, still, oh great, just not doing it. Try one more time. Not sure why it is failing to do so. Aside from just want to make me look like a chump. We'll try the last one to closest line closest point. Still doing it. Great. I have no idea why it's not letting me do this. It let me split the face the first time, and now not so much. That is frustrating to say the very least. Let's try this then. Maybe it's too complex. Oops. Let's try pulling this line in a little bit. I don't know why that would really matter, but there we are. Once again, split faces. Select splitting tool right there. Once again, it's not that it's too close. I mean, it's on that line. Should not matter. No intersection between targets. Split tool. What do you mean no intersection? Not use selected geometry as parting tool, select an edge or sketch. Now, let me look over some stuff, see if I can figure this out. Well, I'm not quite certain why it wasn't allowing me to do that, but the best thing I can offer is try to retweak this to where what I was just trying to do is simply do a single line projected on so that I could use that as a line to follow and use something like a pipe tool or something like that to create a ridge based off your own design off of that. I'm not sure why it's fighting me. And it seems to be that it's not wanting to allow a single line to function, whereas it might work as a closed sketch for whatever reason. I'm not sure why. I might be missing something, but if that's the area you're running into and you're trying to project a single line and split your face that way, that might be the case. I don't know why, because we've used single lines before to split faces and it works perfectly fine. I don't know what the issue is. So we're just going to deal with that as it is. And there we are. So the other thing I wanted to show you is you've got let's just hide these let me hide these sketches here. So we've got that offset face here. And again, you can use a fillet, of course, to work these edges and try to blend these in a little bit. I selected both sides. Now it's more of a round over. Probably just make that a little bit smaller projection or a smaller offset, and you do a little bit better. Now it's got this kind of weird edge lump on, but hey, it works. It's not that bad. It's not bad. Using fillets to blend it all together, that works. Let me save that. Fillet blended offset face. Okay. Now the other one I want to show you is it's a little bit more difficult to control, but it's a really neat feature. And that is I can still use a new form. So I'm going to re-enter the create form space, and you can use faces, create individual faces, which we've done that kind of sort of before. You know, it's a very akin to using a plane tool to just create a wraparound plane, but this can be used to wrap shapes around shapes. In other words, create a face, and you got your toolbox pops up. Yeah, you can just kind of build stuff, whatever, on a basic plane. But if you select object snap, you can actually create things that will wrap directly around the form you have already created. Now, creating face functions off of your selection method, and you can create by sides, edges, or chains. I would leave it just as simple, and you have to select a number of sides, which are really basically you're selecting points. So I would keep it at 4. If you want to make it more complex, do so. Leave it at 4, and as long as you select object snap. Now, right now, I'm going to leave this offset at 0, and you'll see what will happen. So I'm going to kind of just work something along the frog's back. You can see as I create points, I choose 4 points. Doesn't really matter. I'm making some sort of polygon, creates a face. But as I continue, and you can snap to the previous corners, remember, you have to have 4 edges. There we go. But as you can see, as I select more, it is actually wrapping around that frog, actually around the shape that I've already created. Now, as I said, it's a little bit more difficult to control because you have to create complete faces, and you can't go too far with this because obviously it's somewhat limited. But this is essentially, hey, I want to make some armor for my frog. And this is actually how you can do it. And you can see how these faces, although kind of a little awkward, it is in fact following that form. Now, if I had a more simple form than like this oddly complex frog, yeah, it'd be a little bit more straightforward. And I'm just kind of building something out. Again, you have to connect your faces, so it gets a little bit awkward in making more complex shapes. So right there, I overlapped the thing, so I'm going to have to, nope, escape. But when you hit finish, it smooths everything back out, and now you have a fully transformable shape. And let me hit finish form. Now, of course, it's not perfect. It kind of tries to average some things out. So wrapping around this complex shape here didn't do so hot. But let's go back to edit form. And you can see really where it's wrapping stuff around. Cool thing is what you can do with stuff like this is now fully manipulatable. So things like I could go in and say, delete some vertices, that sort of thing, or go to edit form and I can, by points, I can drag stuff up, just like you could before. It's a little more awkward because of how you're working, but you do have a fully transformable thing here. So if you're trying to make, I don't know, accessories, make a, a hat, or I don't know, something to that effect. You can tweak this, you can play around with this, you can continue to stretch this shape, you can drag it around. And as long as you also in edit form, there is the object snap checkbox. It will continue to do its best to wrap itself around that form you have created. Now, like I said, it has a lot of trouble with more complex shapes. So if you have more something simple, kind of like maybe your stuffed animal kind of thing is more like gumdrop shaped or something, this will have a lot better time with this. And you have some other options here, you know, how you're offset, stuff like that. Select OK. Now, one of the things I could do is I could go to the thicken tool, select that face, and it's going to do its best as an offset tool, meaning in all directions and an offsetting, let's say 3 millimeters. Now it's going to show this in more of dimensional form because that's just how it defaults to showing, but it'll show you, and you have your same selection options, meaning thicken and soft, sharp, which would mean, you know, it's a sharp edge. You can tweak that later. No edge if you want to join stuff together. Let's play with sharp for now, direction normal. And now I have this side. And yeah, we kind of sort of have like some sort of wonky frog armor going. Now, of course, where I deleted that vertex, it did some weird collapsing, so probably shouldn't have done that. Might have to go back and fix some stuff here. Looks like delete some faces. Oof, yeah, it did some really funky stuff there, huh? Oh man, it did some really weird stuff. Not sure how much I can fix of this. Might have to just delete that whole corner. There we go. Kind of at least got close to a rounded edge. Now I can go to modify. Let's go to fill hole. There we go. That smoothed it out a lot better. Select OK. Finish form. Now, like I said, because they had that big weird ridge on the side, you can see it's not really going to work right there. So, like I said, on these more complex shapes, doesn't work as well. You can do your best to reshape that form and get it outside of the frog ridge thing, or hey, go back in, edit the frog. Let's try to bring those edges, edit form, and let's try to drag those downward a little bit. See what that looks like. Recalculate everything now. There we go. Brought it down below. All right, frog armor. In case you needed to know how to make armor for your slightly squished frog, so it doesn't get squished again. So the offset tool, the offset shape. Oops, it completely boggled the fillet, so I'll have to redo that. That's okay. Edit that. I don't know why it. Oops, should have saved. Give it a second. Error codes all around. Come on, buddy. There you go. Not sure why it now won't do that, so let's shrink that maybe 1.5, make it smaller. Sometimes shrinking the edges. Nope. Now it's, I don't know why it's doing that. Before it was perfectly fine. Ugh. What? There's hardly any fillet to it now. I don't know. Now it's giving me trouble. So might have to, looks like that whole offset really tweaks some stuff. There we are. Now it has a much more mechanical looking ridge on its back, but there we are. That's this robot plate to cover up the missing ridge. Fine, whatever. So anyway, obviously you got some clipping there and such, and you can continue to play with this, but that offset, that object snap face creation tool is really cool. It doesn't work very well on overly complex shapes, but you can see a way how you could add features and such that way. And then this is a fully transformable form all on its own, so you could continue to split faces and add details, stuff like that onto there. So some fun stuff. Obviously you see where there's some limits, but there's some interesting ways to add some additional features and such. And of course we can still keep going with our standards here. So, you know, if I wanted to add, like, I don't know, let's create a sketch right there and give it at least the sense of a bit of a frog lip thing going. Ribbit. Finish sketch. And let's at least split faces. that one, and those. Oh, that one too. And our splitting tool is lay sketch, project across. Yep, now we're getting the same errors. Don't know why it's no longer letting me split faces and such. That's strange. I was getting plenty on that. Let's try then. Last bit. Like we said, it was having trouble doing that, so let's try creating an offset here. Yep. Then we'll just close this sketch with a 2-point circle there at the back. And trim that out. There we go. Finish. Split face. That one. And that one. Select our splitting tool. Now we go. And yeah, I guess it's only going to work with a closed sketch. So now we could use something like, we can either delete that out, or let's use offset face again and select those. And with this, I'll deboss, which means basically extruding inward. So let's say -3. If it works. Why isn't it functioning? That's weird. Oh, -3 was too much, and I didn't see the error because it's underneath my camera. So -2 it is then. Select OK. There we go. Now it's at least kind of got a little bit of a derpy smile going. But yeah, a couple different ways you can add some little simple features. We talked about with something like this, you can, of course, let's see here. Armor and mouth. That makes plenty of sense. Now you could do some, at least now I have some additional lines here. And I'll use the pipe tool, select that edge. And we want to join. And now we could give it some nice luscious frog lips. 2 millimeter frog lips is too much. 1.5. Less. There we go. Let's bring up the appearance tool. By faces, we'll give it. If you can't have fun with this, then what's the point, really? Here. Luscious frog lips. Although it appears to be slightly sad about the fact. There you go. So any line that you can project onto the thing, what becomes an edge, is something you could use, like one of the following tools, like a pipe, like a sweep tool, something like that. You can certainly use like lofts and such like that to create custom profiles into that sort. So there's just so many different ways you can add features to this. Obviously, we're just scratching the surface with all of this and surface tools. But play around. Basically, if you have an idea and you just don't know if it's possible, let's talk. Maybe we can figure it out. So there's some ways you can create that. Frog with armor, or maybe there we go, Robo Frog, cybernetic enhancement. Add some like little circuit details and such onto this. Cybernetic frog, Terminator frog. Why not? All right. Well, hopefully that's not too confusing, or at very least misleading in the the issues we ran into tonight. At least we were able to find our way back out of some of them, and others, you just might have to call it and delete stuff and go from there. But don't be afraid to back up, start again, and especially if you're trying to make something look at least slightly like something, keep references. Hopefully have fun. try not to go too crazy, and good luck with it.